10 brutal facts about traveling the Old West in a covered wagon. Ever played the Oregon Trail game? Or maybe you grew up watching westerns with those iconic covered wagons rolling across the prairie. But how much do you really know about covered wagon travel? Before cars, trains, or planes, these wagons were the only way to reach the West. And it was a brutal journey. Months of hardship, danger, and discomfort. Forget romantic notions of pioneers galloping across the plains. The reality was far grittier. Get ready to discover 10 surprising facts about what life was really like inside those covered wagons. Months of misery. Covered wagon travel wasn't exactly known for its speed. On a good day, with flat terrain and favorable weather, a wagon might cover 20 miles. But that was the best-case scenario. More often, they averaged between 8 and 20 miles a day. Rough terrain, mountain passes, or bad weather could slow them to a crawl. Let's say you were starting in St. Louis, a common starting point for westward journeys. The straight-line distance to San Francisco is about 1,650 miles. Even at the optimal speed of 20 miles a day, that's still almost 90 days of travel. But that's just a theoretical calculation. In reality, wagons rarely maintained that pace. There were constant delays, broken wheels, sick animals, bad weather, difficult terrain. The actual trails were also much longer than the straight-line distance, winding around obstacles and adding many more miles to the journey. As a result, a trip from St. Louis to the West Coast typically took around 6 months. 6 months of grueling travel, exposed to the elements, with limited food and comfort. It was a dangerous undertaking. People got sick, injured, and sometimes even died along the way. Reaching the West Coast was a monumental achievement, a testament to the pioneers' resilience and determination. They paid a steep price in time and hardship for the chance at a new life. Could you imagine traveling for 6 months in a covered wagon? What do you think would be the hardest part? Wagon choices and limitations. When pioneers prepared for their westward journey, they had a couple of main wagon options. The most iconic was the prairie schooner, that classic covered wagon we all recognize. Large wooden hoops spanned the length of the wagon, covered with canvas to create a protective canopy. This canvas provided shade from the sun and a somewhat secure space to store belongings. It was the 19th century equivalent of a minivan, hauling families and their possessions across vast distances. And the name? From a distance, the curved canvas tops resembled the sails of a schooner ship, hence the nickname Prairie Schooner. These wagons were designed for those long hauls to the West Coast, but the journey was anything but comfortable. The other option was the Conestoga wagon. Larger and heavier than the Prairie Schooner, it was pulled by teams of up to 6 horses, but its size and weight made it unsuitable for long cross-country journeys. The Conestoga was better suited for shorter hauls, like moving from a city like St. Louis to the Kansas or Oklahoma territories. It was often used for transporting goods rather than families making the arduous westward trek. Regardless of the wagon type, travel was incredibly challenging. Forget paved roads. Pioneers followed rough dirt trails, often little more than rutted paths. Harsh weather could turn these trails into muddy quagmires. Broken wheels were common. Animals often became exhausted or injured, and wagons could get stuck, break down, or even fall apart completely. These wagons, while essential, were a constant reminder of the hardships of life on the trail. Sleep under the stars. It's easy to imagine pioneer families snuggling up inside their covered wagons at night. After all, there's a canvas roof, right? Seems like a natural shelter. But the reality was quite different. Those prairie schooners were packed to the brim with everything a family owned. And the space inside wasn't very big to begin with, only about 4 feet wide and 10 feet long. Think of a slightly oversized queen bed. Now, imagine filling that space with all your worldly possessions. there simply wasn't room for people to sleep inside. So, most nights, families slept outdoors. They might spread blankets on the ground or rig up a makeshift tent using canvas and poles. This offered minimal protection from the elements. They were exposed to scorching sun, freezing temperatures, rain, and wind. And if the weather turned nasty, they'd huddle under their wagons or even sleep on the hard ground beneath them, seeking whatever shelter they could find. It made for uncomfortable and often restless nights. Not exactly a recipe for a good night's sleep, and yes, it probably did a number on their backs. Wild West slow fast food. So, you're heading west in your covered wagon. You've packed your belongings, your tools, everything you need for a new life. But what about food? You can't exactly pop into a grocery store on the Oregon Trail. Those prairie schooners and Conestoga wagons were packed tight with household goods, not ready to eat meals. That's where the chuck wagon comes in. This was the mobile kitchen of the wagon train, similar in size to a prairie schooner, but designed specifically for food preparation and storage. It was essential for keeping families fed on their long journey. The chuck wagon had a water barrel mounted on the side, providing easy access to fresh water throughout the day. Many also featured a coffee grinder, offering a much-needed caffeine boost after a long day's travel. Underneath the chuck wagon was the possum belly, a storage compartment for firewood and, interestingly, dried cow dung, also known as cow chips. On the treeless plains, cow chips were a valuable fuel source for cooking fires. Each evening, the chuck wagon became the heart of the camp. Families gathered around as the cooks prepared simple meals like beans, bacon, and biscuits. It was a time for sharing stories and building community, a welcome respite after a long day on the trail. The chuck wagon wasn't just about food. It was a symbol of resourcefulness and community, essential for survival and morale on the westward journey. No horse culture here. We often associate the Great Plains with horses and horseback riding, and it's true, many Native American tribes became masterful horsemen, using horses for hunting, warfare, and transportation. American soldiers and explorers also relied heavily on horses. But one group was largely excluded from this horse culture: the settlers. For most pioneer families, owning a horse was simply too expensive. Horses were costly to buy and required significant upkeep. Settlers were already stretching their resources to purchase wagons, supplies, and provisions for their journey. A horse was a luxury they couldn't afford. Instead, they relied on mules and oxen. These sturdy animals were much more practical for the westward journey. Unlike horses, mules and oxen could survive on the rough forage found along the trail, making them easier and cheaper to feed. They were also stronger and more durable, capable of pulling heavily loaded wagons across vast distances and through challenging terrain. Mules, known for their sure-footedness, were particularly valuable in mountainous areas. Oxen, while slower, were incredibly strong and reliable, ideal for hauling heavy loads over long distances. They became the workhorses of the westward trails. Upon reaching their destination, settlers continued to rely on their mules and oxen for farming and other tasks. These animals became essential for building their new lives. Horses, while perhaps more glamorous, were simply not practical for the average pioneer family. Their reliance on mules and oxen demonstrates the resourcefulness and practicality that characterized westward expansion. What surprised you the most about the risks pioneers faced? Pack carefully. Imagine traveling for months in a wagon with no shocks, on roads that were barely more than dirt tracks. That was the reality for pioneers heading west. The ride was rough, to say the least. Prairie schooners, the most common wagons, were notoriously bumpy. Their tall, narrow design made them unstable, and the wooden wheels and axles offered no cushioning whatsoever. Every rock and rut sent jolts through the wagon. Passengers were bounced around constantly for hours, days, weeks on end. Settlers tried to minimize the bouncing by packing carefully, placing heavy items at the bottom. But even with the best packing, the ride was still incredibly rough. And surprisingly, the prairie schooner was considered an upgrade from the Conestoga wagon. While larger and able to carry more, the Conestoga's size made it even more likely to tip over. Many trails were barely wide enough for the Conestoga, and its wheels would frequently slip off the track, making for a truly bone-jarring experience. To escape the constant jolting, many pioneers opted to walk alongside their wagons. But imagine walking for hundreds, even thousands of miles across that rough terrain. It was exhausting and exposed them to the harsh elements. So, it was a tough choice: endure the brutal ride or the grueling walk. Neither option was easy, and it highlights the hardships pioneers faced on their journey west. Bring gear for a breakdown. Imagine this. You're traveling across the country in a covered wagon, miles from anywhere. Suddenly, something breaks. No paved roads, no garages, no tow trucks. Just you, your broken wagon, and the wilderness. This was the reality for pioneers. Wagon breakdowns were a constant threat. The rough trails were brutal. Wooden wheels cracked and splintered on rocks and rough terrain. Axles snapped under the strain. Metal parts wore down and broke off. And when something broke, you were on your own. So, pioneers packed their wagons with essential tools: hammers, saws, axes, nails, anything they might need for repairs. They also carried spare parts, knowing that breakdowns were inevitable. But sometimes even the best preparations weren't enough. They had to improvise, using whatever materials they could find to make repairs. A broken wagon meant a halt to the journey. Families had to unload everything, a back-breaking task in itself. Often, they even had to flip the wagon on its side to access the undercarriage for repairs. All this while exposed to the elements, wild animals, and other potential dangers. Every successful repair was a hard-won victory, a testament to their resilience and ingenuity. They were their own mechanics, relying on their skills and resourcefulness to overcome these constant challenges. If you were packing for a covered wagon journey, what 3 modern items would you have to bring? Rain, rain, go away. Weather was a constant challenge for pioneers crossing the western trails. Those prairie schooners with their canvas tops offered some protection, but not much. The canvas itself wasn't waterproof. Settlers had to treat it to make it resistant to the elements. They started with heavy cotton duck canvas, usually around 10 ounces. Then, they'd coat it with linseed oil. This created a water-resistant barrier, protecting the family's belongings from rain and light snow. Once treated, the canvas was carefully draped over the wagon's frame and tied down securely. But even treated canvas wasn't foolproof. On the open prairie, wind was a constant factor. Rain rarely fell straight down. Strong gusts could blow it sideways, right under the canvas cover. And when it wasn't raining, wind often whipped up clouds of dust and sand, pelting the wagons and infiltrating every crevice. To combat this, settlers added a drawstring to the edges of the canvas. This allowed them to pull the canvas tight, creating a more enclosed space, like a giant hoodie for their wagon. It helped keep out the wind, rain, and dust, offering a little extra protection against the harsh elements. But even with these precautions, severe weather remained a constant threat. Rough river runs. Sooner or later, every westward-bound pioneer family faced a river crossing. Even though much of the West is dry, rivers and streams crisscrossed the landscape, posing a serious challenge. These crossings were tough on everyone: the families, their animals, and their wagons. Sometimes, at larger rivers, there'd be a ferry. But ferries weren't cheap, and most settlers couldn't afford them. That meant fording the river, driving the wagon straight through the water, a risky proposition. At smaller rivers, pioneers often had to improvise, building their own rafts from whatever materials they could find. If they were lucky, there'd be trees nearby, and they could lash together logs to create a makeshift ferry. The key was finding the right spot to cross. They needed a narrow section with a calm current. Once they found a promising location, they'd try to waterproof the wagon bed, coating it with wax and sealing any cracks. The wagon itself became a sort of boat, a very fragile one. Then, with their oxen straining, they'd slowly push into the current. A successful crossing was a huge relief, but it was always a gamble. If the current was too strong or the wagon too heavy, it could easily overturn, spilling everything into the river. Animals could be swept away. People could be injured or even drowned. River crossings were tense, dangerous moments, a stark reminder of the perils of the westward journey. And yet they pushed on. It's truly remarkable that those pioneers pushed westward, despite the incredible hardships they faced. The dream of a better life, the chance to own their own land, fueled their determination. Entire families, from grandparents to young children, embarked on these arduous journeys, hoping for a fresh start. They were the driving force behind westward expansion, ushering in a new era for the United States. However, this westward movement had devastating consequences for Native Americans. As settlers claimed land, Native American tribes were displaced and confined to reservations. Their way of life was irrevocably altered, often tragically so. This era was shaped by the concept of manifest destiny, the belief that America was destined to expand across the continent. And so it did, reaching all the way to the Pacific. The frontier opened up, leading to industrial growth and technological advancements like the Transcontinental Railroad. By the late 1800s, cross-country travel became significantly easier. But it was those early pioneers in their covered wagons who blazed the trail. Their journeys were incredibly difficult, filled with back-breaking labor and constant danger. Many didn't survive. Their story is one of incredible resilience and determination, but it's also a story of loss and displacement. It's a complex and important part of American history. Please comment 1 to let me know you'll be watching this video until the end. Hazards of the journey. Just how dangerous was the Oregon Trail? It's tough to say for sure. Like the total number of emigrants, death tolls are hard to pin down precisely. Estimates vary quite a bit. Some historians place the mortality rate at around 4 to 6% of all travelers. That translates to somewhere between 12,000 and 24,000 deaths. Other estimates go as high as 10%. What were the biggest dangers? Accidents and disease. Pioneer diaries frequently mention accidental shootings, injuries from encounters with animals, drownings, and deaths from exposure to the cold. Wagon accidents were also common, and tragically, children were sometimes seriously injured after falling under the wheels of a moving wagon. Life on the trail was precarious. Death was a constant companion, a stark reminder of the risks pioneers faced on their journey west. Disease was a constant threat on the Oregon Trail. Sanitation was a major challenge. Opportunities to bathe or wash clothes were rare, and clean drinking water was often scarce. Human and animal waste, along with garbage and dead animals, often contaminated water sources. Cholera, a waterborne disease, was the biggest killer overall. Diphtheria, another highly contagious illness, was the leading cause of death among children. Weakened by exhaustion and poor nutrition, pioneers were also vulnerable to typhoid, mountain fever, likely a tick-borne illness, dysentery, mosquito-borne diseases like malaria, food poisoning, scurvy, caused by vitamin C deficiency, and alkali poisoning from drinking contaminated water. Measles, mumps, and smallpox also took their toll, especially on children. Childbirth also posed serious risks to women on the trail. The lack of proper medical care meant that even minor illnesses could quickly become life-threatening. Disease was a constant fear, and its presence cast a long shadow over the westward journey. We often see movies depicting circled wagons under attack by Native Americans. But in reality, conflict with Native Americans was relatively rare during the peak years of the Oregon Trail. Historian John Unruh's research suggests that fewer than 400 immigrants were killed in Native American attacks between 1840 and 1860. More often than not, interactions between pioneers and Native Americans were peaceful, even helpful. Native Americans often traded supplies with the pioneers, operated ferries, or assisted with managing livestock. While wagon trains did often circle their wagons at night, this was primarily to corral their animals, not to defend against attacks. In the rare instances when attacks did occur, wagons were typically in a line of travel, not a defensive circle. The Hollywood image of constant conflict doesn't reflect the more nuanced reality of life on the Oregon Trail. Sadly, many of the conflicts that did occur between pioneers and Native Americans were sparked by the pioneers themselves. Cultural misunderstandings, arrogance, and acts of violence against Native Americans, such as shootings, sometimes provoked retaliation. And often, this retaliation wasn't directed at the specific group responsible, but at the next wagon train that came along. After the 1850s, attacks on smaller wagon trains or individual travelers did increase. This rise in violence reflected growing Native American hostility towards white settlers who were increasingly encroaching on their lands. The relationship between pioneers and Native Americans was complex and often fraught with tension, and the increasing pressure of westward expansion exacerbated these tensions. The end of the Oregon Trail wasn't always a happy ending. Many pioneers arrived in dire straits. Some had run out of food and were starving. Others were sick and exhausted. Many were destitute, having lost their wagons, their belongings, or spent their last dollars on tolls. Fortunately, established Oregon residents often organized relief efforts. Charitable settlers would form pack trains and meet the new arrivals at the Dalles, providing much-needed supplies and assistance for the final leg of their journey. This aid was often the difference between life and death for those who had endured so much to reach their destination. While the journey west was full of hardship, it also revealed the compassion and generosity of those who had already made the arduous trek. The trail's legacy. The driving of the Golden Spike at Promontory, Utah in 1869, completing the first transcontinental railroad, signaled a major shift in westward migration. The era of the great overland trails was coming to a close, but the Oregon Trail itself had been evolving for decades. The California Gold Rush of 1849 brought a flood of 49ers, transforming the trail and its surrounding communities. The 1850s saw an increased military presence along the route, along with physical improvements like ferries and bridges. Steamboats began plying the Columbia River, offering an alternative to wagon travel for part of the journey. The 1860s brought even more changes. Settlements grew larger and more numerous. Communication improved with the Pony Express, and then the transcontinental telegraph. Stagecoach lines expanded, offering faster travel options. And after the Civil War, conflicts with Native Americans intensified in many areas. The Oregon Trail, once a remote and challenging path, was becoming increasingly integrated into a rapidly changing nation. The railroad may have marked the end of an era, but the Oregon Trail had already undergone a significant transformation. The new technologies of communication and transportation often followed the established routes of the Oregon Trail. Telegraph lines were strung alongside the trail, and railroad tracks were sometimes laid directly over its path. While the railroad didn't immediately eliminate wagon travel, it dramatically reduced the need for it. Of all the westward trails, the Oregon Trail remained in use the longest, partly because the railroad didn't reach Oregon until the early 1880s. Even after the railroads replaced most wagon train traffic, the Oregon Trail continued to serve a purpose. It became a major route for driving cattle and sheep eastward to market. The trail, once a path of westward expansion, now facilitated a different kind of movement, connecting the developing West with the established markets of the East. The Oregon Trail, though no longer a primary route for westward migration, continued to play a role in the evolving American economy. The Oregon Trail, as a continuous, traversable route, no longer exists, but its legacy remains. Traces of the trail are still visible today, offering glimpses into this important chapter of American history. In many places, you can still see the ruts carved into the ground by thousands of wagons. Near Guernsey, Wyoming, these ruts are particularly striking, worn as deep as 5 feet into the sandstone. Imagine the countless wagons that passed through this very spot, carrying hopeful pioneers westward. Names and dates carved into soft sandstone formations, like Independence Rock, still bear witness to the passage of these travelers. These inscriptions, made over a century ago, offer a personal connection to the pioneers who made this arduous journey. Many landmarks along the trail are now protected areas. Scotts Bluff National Monument and Chimney Rock National Historic Site preserve iconic formations that guided and inspired generations of pioneers. Historic forts, like Forts Bridger, Kearney, Laramie, and Vancouver, along with sites like the Whitman Mission, offer further insights into life on the trail. These preserved sites allow us to connect with the past, offering a tangible link to the pioneers who forged a path westward, shaping the nation we know today. Recognizing the importance of the Oregon Trail, the U.S. Congress established the Oregon National Historic Trail in 1978. The goal was to preserve and protect the trail's remnants and provide public access where possible. The National Park Service oversees the trail, working in partnership with the Bureau of Land Management and other agencies. Several interpretive centers along the route offer visitors a deeper understanding of the trail's history and significance. The Oregon Trail is also connected to other National Park Service sites, including Homestead National Monument of America in Nebraska, Fossil Butte National Monument in Wyoming, and Craters of the Moon National Monument and Preserve, and Hagerman Fossil Beds National Monument in Idaho. The trail even passes through sections of several national forests. These sites offer a broader perspective on the westward expansion, exploring themes of settlement, natural history, and the challenges faced by pioneers. By preserving and interpreting these sites, we gain a deeper appreciation for the sacrifices and triumphs of those who traveled the Oregon Trail, shaping the American West and the nation as a whole. The Oregon Trail hasn't just left its mark on the landscape, it's also become part of popular culture. Several movies have depicted the trail and the challenges faced by pioneers. In 1977, there was even a short-lived television series called The Oregon Trail. But perhaps the most famous portrayal of the Oregon Trail is the educational computer game. Hugely popular in the 1980s and 90s, the game introduced generations of students to the hardships and adventures of westward migration. And it's not just a relic of the past. The Oregon Trail game has been re-released in various digital formats, ensuring that new generations can experience this interactive journey into history. From movies to television to video games, the Oregon Trail continues to capture our imagination, reminding us of the pioneers who braved the unknown to forge a new life in the West. So, there you have it. Covered wagon travel, not exactly a luxury vacation. It was a grueling test of endurance, a constant struggle against the elements, and a roll of the dice with every mile. These pioneers faced incredible hardships, but their determination forged a path westward, shaping the American West as we know it. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything. If you enjoyed this video, consider watching other videos in this series. Don't forget to subscribe and share Who Remembers with someone you know. As always, thank you so much for watching.